Examination, a podcast by your host, the nationally renowned criminal defense attorney, Neil Rockheim.
Hey everybody, it's Neil Rockheim again, your host of Killer Cross-Examination, and I want to get right to it. I don't want to waste any time at all on this holiday episode of Killer Cross-Examination. For those of you who tune in, who know what this podcast and what I do and what we're all about, it is about attempting to expose new ways to cross-examine, new ideas, new concepts in the area of criminal defense and cross-examination. And we try to develop topics and to approach topics in a way that not only you can use lawyers, clients, those who are in the legal field can use, not only law students and those who are studying criminal justice can use or apply or save to be used at a later date, but also information that those of you who are interested in criminal justice, interested in the legal system can use, and we try to do it in an entertaining way. And I don't want to waste any time at all, any more of your time during this holiday week or this short week to get to it, because what I want to talk about now is I want to talk about forensic science and scientists. We all have taken a science class here and there. We've taken a science class in high school. We took a science class when we were in college, when we had to study for the SAT. At the ACT, there was a science section. We were surrounded by science, and we always knew and we know for a fact that no science is perfect, that all science is imperfect, that science itself, there is a scientific method, and the scientific method is essentially that you start off with a hypothesis, and then you come up with you test the hypothesis, and you attempt to verify whether the hypothesis is true or not. And science is advanced by whether or not the hypothesis or the theory is proven or not proven. The scientists should be happy to prove, to publish whether or not their theory, their hypothesis was supported by the evidence or not. Because even if they start off with a hypothesis and their experimentation, their experiment, their science, their effort at determining whether or not that hypothesis is true, whether or not it's true or not, they can advance the goal of science. They should be happy to publish their result. They should be happy to say, I thought A would be true, but my experiment proved that it's not. And that would advance the cause of science. But we all know that science is messy. Science is expensive. Science is dirty. There's no perfect method in science. There's no 100%. It's why no matter how you approach any type of surgery or you approach any type of scientific study, you read the study and you read all the different subparts of any scientific study or any scientific experiment, but there's not 100% unanimity. It's why when we're dealing with topics like global warming or climate change or even things related to the coronavirus or the efficacy of a particular type of treatment or the efficacy of a typical type of medicine, that there's no 100% unanimity. Even if the vast majority of the evidence is on one side or the other, even if the vast majority of scientists agree with one side or the other, even if it's nearly unanimous, it is not 100%. There's always a caveat. There's always a qualifier. There's always a dissenting voice. And I mention this because in the legal system, law enforcement and the legal system has taken a stranglehold, a literal stranglehold on science for years and has attempted to choke out of it the things that we know to be true about science, that it is expensive, that it is imperfect, that it is not absolute, and that there are errors and flaws, uncertainties, and margins of error and room for error in all scientific methods and experience. But not in the legal system, not when it comes to forensic laboratories, and not when it comes to so-called forensic scientists who work for the state. Why is that? Why, when we know that science is complicated, complex, and difficult, and not absolute, and full of errors, why do we have scientists and prosecutors acting and working in conjunction with state-employed scientists who want to act as though the science is perfect? And we've seen time and time and time again the consequences of a legal system that permits the state to claim that its science is perfect. And the reason is that the state, the legal system, the law enforcement community, it needs science to be several things. It needs it to be cheap. Why cheap? It's got to be cheap and inexpensive because that way it's capable of being duplicated over and over and over and over again. 10,000, 20,000, 15,000, 50,000, 100,000 times in the course of a year. It's got to be cheap. It's got to be cost effective. Well, most things that are cost effective when it comes to science are compromised. You want to get the most advanced telecommunications system? It costs money. You want to use 2 tin cans and a string? Guess what? It's cheap. Easy to duplicate, easy to replicate. Science also has to be, according to the legal system and the law enforcement community and the state needs its sciences to be fast. Well, most science is slow. Most science, it takes time, for example, to create a sample, to make sure that the sample is created in a way that its character is preserved and not contaminated, to transport it in a way where it's not compromised, to then have it handled in a way at a laboratory that its integrity is preserved, to have it stored in a way that is where eyes are on it at all times, where it's only handled in a way that is that protects it, and then the sample and the testing process could be done over and over and over again with the most advanced scientific techniques that are expensive, but they take time. But the legal system needs it the opposite. It needs it fast. It needs to get an answer quickly. So, for example, while it may cost more to maybe more expedient or take longer to actually every sample to be hand delivered to the laboratory, that would take too much time. So instead, the police just box the sample up and stick it in the regular mail. That's right. The regular mail, first class mail, U.S. postage, U.S. Postal Service, the one that we keep reading about in the paper, the one that we keep hearing about that it takes like 14 days to get a letter from my house to my neighbor's house. But, you know, it would take more time for every single sample to have to be driven to the police to the laboratory from wherever it was gathered. And it would take more time and be more expensive. But the legal system needs it fast, so stick it in the mail. And for some of the stuff, like, for example, like a breath test, it needs the results like immediately. So whether or not the science is good science or bad science, we don't care. We need it fast. We need it quickly. We got to get the results. So we need inexpensive and cheap, and we need fast. And then here comes the real rub. The legal system and the law enforcement community, they need science to be perfect. They need it to be what it's not, perfect. They can't have the science that they're bringing into court to say that that guy did it, or that guy did it, or that person's blood alcohol level was X, or this is what the drug in the blood turned out to be, or this is the fingerprint analysis and the comparison. They need it perfect. Because anything imperfect gets lawyers like me to say, see, there's room for doubt. There's error. There's doubt. There's cause to doubt. there's reasonable doubt. There's reason to doubt, reason to say I'm not sure. All those reasons why that science does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my client is guilty. So the legal system needs the science to be perfect. But nothing's perfect. But the legal system has done its very best to come up with ways to make science, to stranglehold it, to modify it, to shave it, to cut it, to trim it, so that it is all the things that science is not. It is cheap when it is usually expensive. It is fast when it is usually slow. And it is perfect when it is known to be imperfect. And believe it or not, the scientists who come to court, you would think that with the people who come to court and testify about this science, you would think that when they come to court that they are, that they're PhDs, that they got triple doctorate degrees, that they're leaders in their particular field. If you thought that, or you're thinking that, or you're picturing somebody walking into court looking like Professor, I don't know, pick your name, Professor Magruder. I don't know, I picked a name out of the McGregor, whatever the name would be. Professor Johansson, Professor Jones, somebody that would come in with a lab coat and says, Professor, and they have a resume that they unfurl, and it would go all the way from here to the door with, references and studies and periodicals and accolades. You would be dead wrong. How about that? The people who are deciding the scientific outcomes and coming to court and testifying to them in particular cases oftentimes don't have anything more than a bachelor's degree from college. That's all they need. And many of them, if you were to go on a website right now, if I were to go on my computer right now, and I were to look up Michigan Forensic Science State Police Laboratory, I'm willing to bet that I will come up with that there is a job listing somewhere for someone to gain entry into the Michigan State Police Crime Laboratory as a scientist. How about that? The minimum requirement to be a state police forensic scientist in Michigan. How about that? To be called a state police forensic scientist. The minimum requirement is you must have a bachelor's degree in forensic science, natural science, or a related science. That's on the Michigan.gov website. That's it. That's the minimum requirement. No PhD, no studies in the area, no publications in a particular area, no expertise. You just need to have a bachelor's degree in forensic science, natural science, or a related science. How about that? That's all it takes. And if someone wants to apply for a job with the state police, let's see, job application. You can apply MSP, careers, state police. You can literally decide that this is a career that you would like to pursue. Wake up one day and say, you know what? I want to work for the Michigan State Police in their laboratory. How about that? That means that you could literally just choose this as something that you want to do. You could decide you were doing something else and say, you know what? I don't like what I was doing. I have a bachelor's degree in a related scientific area, a bachelor of science in this area, and in botany. And I you know what? I don't want to do this. I would rather just choose to become a forensic scientist with the state police. It's unbelievable. It is, and they do not require any particular studies, publications, to have particular accreditation. None of that. I'm looking right from the state police website. So what does that tell you? What that tells you is that the reason why you don't have to have any more experience than that, the reason we don't have to have any more experience than that is because it's essentially plug and play. We need scientists, quote unquote scientists, people who will come in and will just sort of apply the inexpensive, fast, perfect scientific testing process that is in place. Plug and play. And I encourage anybody who's out there who's ever had to confront a forensic science or a quote-unquote forensic scientist in court to dig deeper or more deeply into their background to learn more about it. Learn more about that person. And you will find that they are no expert at all. They aren't published. They aren't written up. They haven't published studies. They haven't taken part in vast scientific experiments or experimentation. They are regular folk like you or me who got a Bachelor of Science degree and applied for a job and started off most commonly as someone who probably was just a forensic, someone who's an analyst or someone who just worked in the laboratory opening packages and closing packages and making sure that things were labeled properly. And then when there was an opening, they applied for an opening to become a forensic scientist. And then they get the job, and then the next day they're a forensic scientist. And it's because the legal system and the law enforcement community has essentially kidnapped and held hostage the sciences. Because they need the sciences to be cheap, fast, and perfect. Because if they aren't cheap, it'll cost too much, won't be able to use it in mass to assist in attempting to prosecute people. They won't be able to, it has to be fast, so they have fast turnaround time to handle all the cases that they want to apply it to. And it has to be perfect, because they have to be able to come into court and say that they are confident beyond a reasonable doubt that the results prove that this guy was guilty. Anything short of that, which would be the truth, anything short of that, anything that falls short of that, means that the sciences won't assist the law enforcement community in doing what they need, which is to prosecute and convict. Maybe, just maybe, and I'm going to encourage the lawyers out there, the lawyers, the law students, those that are looking at the sciences and things like this, who are potentially cross-examining people, dig deep. Spend some time learning about the sciences. A short study will make you as knowledgeable as many of the people coming to court who are going to testify as quote-unquote forensic scientists. Don't just take their word for it. Are you kidding me? Don't just accept the fact because they know some of the terminology, they work in a laboratory, that makes them a scientist. It doesn't. Doesn't make, just because how'd they get the job? Think about that. The fact that someone works on an airplane, the fact that someone may be a stewardess or a flight attendant, the fact that someone may even be a pilot, doesn't mean that they are an aeronautical engineer and they can design planes. But what it does mean in this case is that if you apply for a job as a flight attendant, you will one day, you could literally get the job by working your way up the chain in the crime lab, so to speak, to be the equivalent of an aeronautical engineer, because you can work your way up to become a forensic scientist just by starting at the ground level, just by applying, just by going on like whatever it is, Indeed.com or Monster.com or whatever one of those employment websites there are out there. What is it, Indeed? Monster? Indeed, Monster? Whichever one it is. And I'm sure there's more. So next time you're confronted with a forensic science report, the next time you hear that somebody had a forensic science conclusion that was reached in a case, the next time if you're a lawyer or you're a law student or you're a paralegal and you see a forensic science report and you see a name at the bottom, don't just go, wow, forensic scientist. Look deep and realize that that person started off applying for a baseline job with almost no experience in that particular discipline. They are not published, not accredited. And for the most part, what they did was they just applied for an open job, for a job opening, and they got it. And they just waited their turn for there to be another job opening, the next rung up the ladder, and they applied for that. And that job happened to be forensic scientist. And so now they walk around as though they actually are a scientist, when all they really do is just use the state's plug-and-play system. Maybe, just maybe, kind of as a looking forward, maybe just thinking forward, maybe if we actually treated the sciences with more respect, with more dignity, with more appreciation, with more awe in the legal system, maybe if we accepted that science was not perfect, that sometimes the answer is we don't know or there's doubt, and maybe, just maybe, if we accepted that science was expensive and not fast and imperfect, maybe we would see the legal system treating its citizens, its victims, its accused with more dignity, with more awe, and with more respect. Maybe we would have more respect for the outcomes. This is Neil Rockine. Thanks for tuning in. Happy Labor Day, everybody. This is Killer Cross-Examination.
Killer Cross-Examination. A podcast by your host, the nationally renowned criminal defense attorney, Neil Rockine.